bisa membisukan.
Ya,
Oke, kelasnya sudah bisa dimulai. Sebelum saya mulai, nanti host tolong bantu saya membisukan orang-orang yang belum membisukan ininya, membisukan mic-nya karena kedengaran di sini. Ya, oke. Kalau begitu kita langsung mulai saja. Assalamualaikum.
lupa saya muda.
Assalamualaikum. Good evening and welcome everyone to another session of Odyssey
Fitur
class
mute
or lecture.
semua ya. Halo.
Kak, oke, oke. I have
Jadi
to.
saya akan mute semua, nanti hanya host yang bisa meng-unmute peserta supaya tertib.
There you go. Iya.
Oke.
Oke. Tolong ya dibantu soalnya ini agak interrupting suaranya. Oke. Ini kan. Alright. Okay. Assalamualaikum. Good evening and welcome everyone to another session of Odyssey class or lecture. My name is Fuad Abdullah Harahap, your MC or host for tonight. Today we'll be discussing permanent revolution, which will be lectured by Oscar Brown of the Spartacist League or Force International. Is that correct, Oscar?
That's correct.
Okay, great. To be honest with you, all this again isn't something that I, as a analytic philosopher of religion, entirely understand. I leave all the explanation to Mr. Oscar Brown himself. Are you ready? Are you ready, my friend?
Yes, ready.
Oh, great, excellent. I'm so excited for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Permanent Revolution by Mr. Oscar Brown. You can
Yes.
share the screen from now.
Should be working.
Okay. Okay,
Selamat
I
malam.
can see.
Selamat
Selamat
malam,
malam.
kawan. Saya Oscar dari organisasi Spartacus League. So as a brief introduction to us and our orientation, our Marxist heritage, we're an international Trotskyist organization and tendency, and our conception and practice of Marxism aims to carry forward the Bolshevik tradition of Lenin, Trotsky, and the Third and the Fourth Internationals. For us, Marxism today can only mean the fight to consolidate a revolutionary program on the basis of historical and dialectical materialism, and a revolutionary leadership of the working class to fight for that program. We see as the key lesson of Leninism and of the Russian Revolution the need to fight to break the working class movement of every country from pro-capitalist, social chauvinist, and bourgeois nationalist misleaderships. So in this spirit, our discussion today is about Leon Trotsky's theory of permanent revolution, which really means, to us, it really means it's about the Marxist program in the struggle against imperialism. Our epoch of imperialism, what Lenin called the higher stage of capitalism, is defined by the division of the world between a large number of oppressed countries and a handful of oppressor countries, which dominate through the control and the export of financial capital. The balance of power for the last 30 years in the world situation has been characterized by the imperialist hegemony of United States imperialism, which is in alliance with the other imperialist powers and subjugates the great mass of the world population. But this world order is in crisis as well, as US hegemony is breaking down and the American empire is increasingly hysterical in its response to that breakdown. So that is creating really greater instability and a shifting balance of class and political forces, which confronts the workers' movement everywhere, but especially in the neo-colonial world, where national capitalist power is less stable. Whether this situation will lead to a spiral of crisis and reaction or be seized by the international working class, we think will depend on the struggles ahead and the ability of a revolutionary leadership to offer a Marxist program and a Marxist perspective. So when Trotsky generalized his theory of permanent revolution, which I'll get into, the old colonial empires still stood, but everywhere they were challenged by increasingly explosive anti-colonial movements. Today, open colonial plunder is no longer the political reality facing Africa, Latin America, Eastern Europe, and Asia, but imperialism and neo-colonial domination and national oppression, these remain central realities for the modern world order. What we see is that while politically independent and while winning political independence, countries like Indonesia and others across the world continue to be pillaged neo-colonies, which are held in bondage by the economic and military power and blackmail of the great powers with control over finance capital. Just as some examples, imperialist debts, the looting of natural resources, cheap labor, control of monetary policy, all of these are ways that imperialist monopolies and the kind of international financial oligarchy plunder the neo-colonial world and generalize underdevelopment and uneven development across the world. So the result is that backwards and pre-capitalist relations that deny peasants land and bread are maintained. At the same time, millions flood into the international working class. Factories, railroads, mines, ports spring out of the ground while water buffalo and wooden tools still plow the land. That's the reality for countries across the world. So the theory of permanent revolution, Trotsky's theory of permanent revolution, recognizes two important results of this arrangement of international class power. Firstly, the dominant role of foreign capital gives the national bourgeoisies, the national capitalist classes of the post-colonial world, a weak character, and it traps them in the position which Trotsky referred to as being a semi-ruling and semi-oppressed class. The second result is that the proletarianization of the country by foreign capital creates a powerful working class with the ability to confront the relatively weak national bourgeoisie and imperialism in general. Resistance to destitution and national humiliation, as well as aspirations for land, democracy, and economic development, historically and today, give basic demands by the workers and peasants of the neo-colonial world an explosive character. The national bourgeoisie has an objective interest in resolving the basic democratic and national tasks required for development and modernization. So, for instance, the development of national industry, national unification, and land reform. But these tasks in a post-colonial and neo-colonial context, all of these require a confrontation with imperialism, which is still globally powerful and still subjugates these countries. For a weak, as we've said, a weak bourgeoisie capitalist class to resist foreign capital would require a mobilization of the masses, however, and that obviously would threaten the private property of the national bourgeoisie. So this is kind of the basics of Marxist class analysis. But what this means is that the national bourgeoisie ends up always forced to balance between the two more powerful forces of imperialist capital on the one hand and the working class on the other hand, leaning on either of the two forces at any point to defend its own interests. At the same time, as I've said, as a propertied class, a class with property, it knows that the proletariat is a threat to its interests. And at the bottom of it all, it's forced to lean on the imperialists, and it's tied to the imperialists through, countless ways. It's made dependent and close with them. I think sort of to bring this a bit concretely to Indonesian history, to me, I think this process really is reflected, for instance, in the nature of the Sukarno government following independence. And I think the power of that government was in many ways maintained by balancing, on the one hand, the force of like the imperialist-backed army, and on the other hand, the powerful workers' movement, which was controlled by the PKI. And ultimately, when this balance becomes impossible to maintain and unworkable, and when it seems like Sukarno is leaning too heavily in favor of the PKI, the military resolves that situation in the interests of international capital and with imperialist support. That's 1965. So Suharto was ultimately, the new order was ultimately backed by most layers of the Indonesian national bourgeoisie because he provided it stability and security. But in the long term, the new order really entrenched both oligarchic power in Indonesia, but also imperialist domination in general in the long term. That said, given a favorable balance of class forces and pushed by the workers and peasants at home, the national bourgeoisie can and historically has carried out progressive measures such as land reform, nationalizations of industry. Like two examples of this are the nationalization of the oil industry in Mexico in 1938, and the nationalization of the Suez Canal by Nasser in Egypt in 1956. So the national bourgeoisie can do this, but it does carries out these measures in its own interests and with its own methods. Ultimately, it tries to remain at the head of the struggle for national liberation in order to contain that struggle and to keep it within boundaries that are acceptable to its rule. So to mobilize the masses behind it, the bourgeoisie has to maintain control over it. And so it crushes revolutionaries, it crushes revolutions, it contains the unions, it sponsors state-controlled peasants' organizations. All of these are ways in which national capitalist power maintains its control over a neocolonial country. Any effort of independent action by the workers and the oppressed tends to be met with repression. And thus, by repressing the only force that's able to deliver genuine nationalization, modernization, etc., the bourgeoisie not only suppresses social revolution, but also sabotages the struggle for national liberation at every step and paves the way for imperialist reaction in the long term. Because of its ties to imperialism, the national bourgeoisie is not only incapable of solving the problem of national emancipation, but ultimately plays a thoroughly reactionary role. So we think that this process explains the continued unresolved nature of neocolonial oppression and national domination in countries around the world. As Trotsky argues on this quote that I've had up here, the national bourgeoisie of the neocolonial world is ultimately incapable of fully resolving the national and democratic tasks of a bourgeois revolution. So he says, with regards to the countries of belated bourgeois development, especially in the colonial and semi-colonial countries, the theory of permanent revolution signifies that the complete and genuine solution of their tasks of achieving democracy and national emancipation is conceivable only through the dictatorship of the proletariat as the leader of the subjugated nation above all of its peasant masses. That is speaking about the class rule of the working class of the oppressed nations rather than the class rule of the capitalist class. What this means in practice is that the task for Marxists is to advance the struggle against imperialism in opposition to the treacherous role of the national bourgeoisie. To do so with the aim of wresting the leadership of the anti-imperialist struggle out of its hands. We say that the anti-imperialist struggle cannot be brought to victory without proletarian revolution, and that likewise, proletarian revolution is not possible cannot take place without the struggle against imperialism. The task is to turn the struggle against imperialism and for national liberation into a lever for social revolution against capitalism itself. So just to quote another quote from Trotsky, he says that the dictatorship of the proletariat, which has risen to power as the leader of the democratic revolution, is inevitably and very quickly confronted with the fulfillment of which is bound up with deep inroads into the rights of bourgeois property. The democratic revolution grows over directly into the socialist revolution and thereby becomes a permanent revolution. So we say that the working class of oppressed countries must come to power in order to resolve the democratic and national questions and to begin the fight for socialism. But the coming to power of the proletariat in one country does not complete the revolution, but only begins it. This is the other central theory of permanent revolution. To modernize backwards countries, develop national industry, to lift the masses out of misery, all of these require high levels of technology and productivity, and what they require is an international division of labor. Conquests in one country remain subject to imperialist attack. So, for example, the seizing of imperialist assets, including their banks, expropriating landowners, national and foreign, repudiating the debt that is accrued by post-colonial countries, and ripping up so-called free trade treaties, which act only in the interests of imperialism. These are actions which any consistent action which advances the struggle against imperialist slavery ultimately pits the masses, the working class, the peasantry against the bourgeoisie. So thus the victory of the neo-colonial revolution requires the defeat of imperialism. Nationalism is the main ideological tool used to rally the proletariat and oppressed behind unity with the ruling class, with the bourgeoisie. Ultimately, it pits the working class against national minorities, against workers of other countries, and importantly, against workers of oppressor countries. But ultimately, nationalism prevents revolutionary unity in the struggle against the common enemy, which is the imperialists who oppress everybody in every country. Marxists recognize that in order to break the masses from nationalism, it's necessary to distinguish between the nationalism of the oppressed, which is an expression of imperial chauvinism, and the nationalism of the oppressed, which is a reaction to oppression. We think that to deny this distinction is to deny the masses' desire for emancipation, which is expressed in a national context. However, nationalism also can't be defeated by preaching about abstract internationalism. It can only be overcome in struggle by demonstrating that the treachery of the national bourgeoisie in the fight for emancipation. I think this is an important point in like multinational countries as well, which include places like Indonesia, India, and Iran. In countries like this, liberation from imperialist subjugation cannot come about as long as minority nationalities and peoples continue to be subject to oppression by the dominant nation. As Frederick Engels argued, a nation cannot be free while at the same time oppressing other nations. And this means that dominant nationalities actually have a special interest in fighting for the liberation of oppressed minorities and need to become their most consistent champions in order to advance their own liberation. And that's because it's imperialism ultimately which is responsible for the destitution of the masses of both oppressed and oppressor nationalities. It is imperialism which has brought together, engendered all of these divisions within a country. It's also imperialism which has forced countries together alongside borders which are historically arbitrary. Against this, the toilers the only way to kind of break this is to unite the toilers and to unite working class people against imperialism itself. And that, I think, that has to include advocating the right to self-determination of minority nations. That means the right to secede if they so wish. So in an Indonesian context, I think, you dealing with a nationalism which is contradictory because it's a progressive response to colonialism and imperialism, but it's also historically and today used in a way that represses national minorities within the Indonesian state. I think in Indonesia, most Marxists and people on the Indonesian left understand this and have some sort of sympathy, for example, with like the people of West Papua. And I think this is correct and understandable, but it's also not enough. And it's also not Marxist to have kind of a liberal sympathy for people of an oppressed nationality, a national minority. Marxist internationalism recognizes that the only basis to defeat national division is through the unity of the working class of both the oppressed and oppressed nations in the struggle against imperialist capital. So I think this means that really any defense, for instance, of the Papuan people that does not begin from opposition to imperialism as the real enemy in this context is going to fall into a liberal imperialist outlook. It calls for humanitarian intervention. For example, most leaders of Papuan nationalism do so. But this damages any possibility of unity between Papuan and Indonesian workers, and that's what is needed for the liberation of both people. In fact, obviously, this whole situation exists because of imperialism, which has brought about this national division. As I've argued before, permanent revolution signifies that Marxists need to compete with the national bourgeoisie for hegemony over the anti-imperialist struggle. In an Indonesian context, I think there's many ways that the Indonesian bourgeoisie fights for control over anti-imperialist sentiment. So the example I put up here is that I think a big part of like the broad popularity of Jokowi and now Prabowo, they're much more popular than any politicians in Australia. I think that's important to note. But part of that popularity is that many people saw Jokowi as somebody who was fighting to develop the country against the will of foreign capital. I think this is really the case with what is the so-called resource nationalism of Jokowi. He has the quote here that we took back our assets that for decades have been exploited by foreigners and only benefited foreigners. I think in a context like this, Marxists need to struggle to say, yes, we want and support nationalizations against imperialism, but we need to do so in a way to expose the ultimately reactionary position of politicians like Jokowi, who only do so halfway and narrowly in a way that empowers the oligarchs, national oligarchs of Indonesia rather than the working class people. Marxists want nationalization, but they want nationalizations by the working class. The program has to be to push for the occupation of plants, of mines, and railroads, and to do so to force the imperialists to concede, and as a way to put pressure on and to show that the struggle can only be won by the working class and with revolutionary leadership. I think this is also the case with sort of the developmentalism of Jokowiism, which really is a reflection of a way to navigate between world imperialism and a neutral position between it and China. And that just by doing this and by continuing on, we can develop out of the status now and neo-colonial oppression into a modern thing. But obviously, I think in the long run, especially as the social order becomes increasingly unstable, that's increasingly a more difficult position to maintain as the conflict between, for instance, US imperialism and China increases. I think the Marxist movement in Indonesia, this is our understanding, should fight to take the lead of the anti-imperialist movement. And I think that's an opening in the context of obviously a very difficult environment to be talking about Marxism. I think the history of the the history of the Marxist movement in Indonesia is that you have, the Stalinist PKI rejected the theory of permanent revolution and saw its task as being to push forward the national revolution. And because of this, it liquidated into sort of the national movement, and it was left unawares. And when imperialism attacked it, I think that mirrors the description by Trotsky of the Chinese Revolution and the capitulation of Chinese Marxists to the Kuomintang, which in 1927 led to another massacre. And obviously, in Indonesia, you have that on a much larger scale in Indonesian history. As for the modern Marxist movement in Indonesia, I think I'm insufficiently acquainted with the full dynamics of the Indonesian Marxist left. But from what I can understand, I think there is a tendency to deal with many of the key with many of the key political and economic questions of the day, oligarchy, all of these structures of power, as if they're somehow separate from imperial suppression, as if that's a question that can be put to the side or is a secondary question. Actually, these are an interconnected system of power which have to be responded to in an interconnected way. I'm not sure how long I've been going for, but I might be a bit short, but that's the main bulk of my presentation. I'd be interested
You've been gone for like 25 minutes. You still have some 20 minutes more if you want to continue.
I can head onto this one. This is kind of what I wanted to end the presentation on. I might just go into discussion. I think that might be more fruitful because I don't have particularly more, but I can also give some recommendation on kind of reading to understand the theory of permanent revolution. This is from the thesis on the national and colonial question. And I think it really sums up this sort of last question, that the struggle for Marxists has to be to push forward the anti-imperialist movement and the national movement without liquidating into it while maintaining the independence of the working class and the independence of the Marxist perspective. I think that's really the central lesson of permanent revolution and of Marxism in the neocolonial world. And then as for readings and the political background and philosophical background to this thing, obviously there's Trotsky's Permanent Revolution. That's the most obviously directly related question to this. That is available in Indonesian, actually. I've taken some codes from that for the presentation. I think really what Permanent Revolution sums up is the lessons that are codified in the first 4 congresses of the Communist International following the Russian Revolution. And so documents like the thesis on the national and colonial question, and which is quoted over here, and the thesis on the Eastern question really speak to a program for the national revolution in the neo-colonies, or at that point in the colonial world. And as for the modern day, really that's what my organization has been working on, bringing this sort of political philosophy into the modern day. So we have in one of our latest pieces here, our main document, In Defense of Permanent Revolution. I pull from a lot in this presentation. So yes, apologies for being a bit short on the discussion. I think I thought I had more than I did, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so we are going to move on to Q&A session then. Are you ready for that session, Oscar?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Terima kasih Oscar atas presentasinya, for the presentations. Now we are moving on to the Q&A session. Jadi trivia aja buat kawan-kawan. Oscar di sini beliau bisa pakai bahasa Indonesia, tapi saya sarankan buat kawan-kawan yang mau bertanya, use English so we can understand more, because this kind of topics usually will be easier to understand if we use our native language. So yeah, kalau kawan-kawan ada pertanyaan silahkan open mic, atau langsung tanya di kolom komentar. Sekali lagi, preferably bahasa Inggris. Tapi kalau nggak bisa pakai bahasa Inggris, saya bisa bantu terjemahkan untuk Oscar kalau misalnya Oscar required assistance in that. But ya, silakan bagi ada yang mau bertanya. Ya, ini satu orang. One people already asked a question. Apa yang membuat masyarakat tidak memiliki kesadaran kesadaran bahwa mereka adalah kelas pekerja yang memilih. Okay, this a lot of question. Oh, wait. Oscar, kamu bisa melihat pertanyaannya? Do you need help from me to translate it into English?
I might help if you could.
Okay. So the first question is, what makes the people don't have a class consciousness? Is the term right? Yeah.
Class
So that's
consciousness, yeah.
this is a class consciousness, a consciousness that they are the working class that have a voice to demand their rights, to basically demand their rights, like a fair gaji. What do you call that? What do you call gaji in English? Why do I forget this one? Wage ditulis kok di sini ya. Fair wage, access to education and health. So
I think I
to
can
paraphrase. Okay, you can answer it, right? You can understand the question.
Yeah, I think the task of proliferating a class consciousness is obviously there's objective things that create that, but it's also the task of Marxists to push that forward. And I think in the context of imperialist oppression, the struggle against imperialism has to be turned into a struggle to develop class consciousness. So I don't think I think, does that answer the question sort of?
Okay. Okay, that's still the first question, but Mas Muhammad Arham, kira-kira paham dengan jawabannya? Belum ada respon dari beliaunya. Maybe we can move on to the second question. Okay, ini Putra. We for the time being, before the questioner reply, we can move on to the second question. Bagaimana revolusi permanen? How does permanent revolution place the native people, masyarakat adat, the native people that have their own worldview about human interaction and lingkungan? What is it?
The
Environment that depends on the nature and not with economy. Do they have to experience the proletarianism, also they can integrate it by the class struggle? Is that
Yeah.
Do you understand that?
I understand the question.
Okay.
I think there is absolutely a place for the struggle of indigenous people in the theory of permanent revolution, and in Marxist practice. I think you could kind of do a whole presentation on that and a whole document on that. But I think there's many ways in which, like, the systems of imperialism prevents the national development or the of indigenous people, by kind of enforcing conditions of underdevelopment, enforcing colonial oppression. These have a really obviously destructive impact on indigenous people, in every country. And I think we support. I think the task for Marxists is to support the national development of indigenous people everywhere. or the consolidation of culture and heritage and things into the modern world.
Oke, Muhammad Arham, Masnya sudah, oke, beliau belum merespon. Okay, one more. Muhammad Arham basically says that he can understand your answer. There is still one more question, maybe the third question. Is China an imperialist country? What do you think about
This is
that?
another question which could be a full question, a full document. In fact, it is a full document, which is in the latest version of Spartacist. Our perspective, our Marxist perspective, is that China is not an imperialist, nor is it a capitalist country. We consider it a sort of a Stalinist deformed worker state, in the same way as the Trotskyist perspective on the USSR was, albeit it's one with major inroads of capitalist property and which acts as a regional power, not in the interests necessarily of or not in the interests of the working class people, either of China or of the rest of Asia and the world, but in the interests of a narrow kind of bureaucratic clique which rules over nationalized property and nationalized state structure.
Oke, Mas Muhammad Arham itu jawaban ketiga dari Mr. Oscar. I'll call you Mas from now on because
Say
you're
Mas,
in
Mas.
yeah you're among Indonesian right now. So okay, Mas Arham sudah puas dengan jawabnya. He's satisfied with your answers. Makasih Mas Arham. Thank you Mas Arham. We then continue to the next question. Mas Putra. Is the massacre of communists around the world related to the beginning of the fall because there was no international support? If I'm not mistaken, the time span was 1930 to 1980. Do you understand the question?
I think I understand it. That I questioned what it means, the beginning of the fall. Maybe you could clarify that. But
mhm.
but I think it's part of obviously the world chain of in global imperialism in the 20th century.
Yeah,
sorry, I just got sorry. I think it's part of the world chain of global imperialism, which really, I think the massacre of the working class movement in all of these countries, which was fighting for, including Indonesia, which was fighting for national emancipation or had the potential to fight for national emancipation. I think this is part of imposing the neocolonial system and kind of the American system of imperialist hegemony, which is dominant today. So I think that's really intimately built up, connected together with it. It's also connected to kind of the failure of Stalinism to wage the struggle against imperialism to victory, which I think betrayed it in many ways in a way that capitulated to bourgeois nationalism.
Oke, Mas Putra, gimana? Jawabannya cukup memuaskan? Atau do you have another question for Mas Oscar? I have to admit to you, Oscar, this is really this kind of discussion is way out of my league. I really almost know nothing about this kind of topic. Basically, both in the philosophical part or even in the political part. I really try to grasp all the concepts as I'm going along, but I'm very very excited with this one because yeah, you gave me new perspective about even my own country's history. But yeah, okay. Ini Mas Putra said that he can understand your question, so we are moving on to the next.
Just quickly,
question. Do you have?
I'm just gonna post into the chat our article on China and our analysis of China,
Hmm,
which directly deals with the question, is China imperialist and is China capitalist? So
oke.
that's in the chat room.
Ya, di chat kalau mau tahu tentang pertanyaan apakah Cina negara imperialis itu udah ditaruh sama Mas Oscar ke chatnya sekali lagi. Yeah, now we are moving on to the next questioner, Mas Hugo. Mas Hugo, monggo silahkan ininya ditunjukkan pakai bahasa Indonesia atau pakai bahasa Inggris? Please use English, Mas. Mas, jangan lari, Mas. Kok lari? Halo, Mas Hugo, monggo. Mic-nya, sebentar ya. Mic-nya saya hidupkan dulu ya. Maaf. Mas Hugo, wait, tunggu ya, Mas. Minta bunyikan. Oh, sampai mesti
Halo,
hidupin sendiri.
bisa
Oke,
Mas?
udah masuk.
Thank you Mas
Bisa,
Fuad.
bisa, bisa. Oke,
Hi Oscar,
like,
nice to meet you. Uh, I just realized that you are the part of for international, right? It's interesting because I read uh, about Trotsky, about the permanent revolution, and quite curious about uh, how that the Fourth International said that all Leon Trotsky said that the next revolution will be carried by the proletariat, right? Yes, and then, but in the reality now, in every nation, in every country, in every society, right, our consciousness is not always only class consciousness. It is the big problem of, especially in Indonesia. If you ever visit Indonesia, we have so many identities. We have our cultural identity. We have our many identity is not only from cultural, like maybe uh, I'm Sundanese, Javanese, or Sumatranese. Maybe another identities like a fandom. I'm a K-pop fans, or maybe I'm a, Japanese pop fans. And the identity and the consciousness of identity is stronger than the class consciousness. I think this is the most interesting I learned from uh, Indonesia, because what happened in about uh, 1 century ago is quite different from today. Um, and every nation has its story and its circumstances, its condition. I think, is there? I just want to ask: is there any specific strategies and tactics from the Fourth International regarding class consciousness, or winning the support by the bulk of working class, and the working class how the working class mm, uh, increasing their bargaining power in the politics. This is the question I always ask to myself, and I read also many journal and many books about how the working class um, have a bargaining power to face with capitalists. Is I think in Indonesia we don't have that bargaining power, so uh, we have always been underestimated by the oligarchs and the capitalist class. Maybe Oscar I have specific strategies by the for international and tactics also, so we can learn from the for international also. I think I love the explanation about the permanent revolution, and it's uh, makes us learn to develop it in the condition of 21st century. I read also many books about Rosa Luxemburg and also Anton Pannekoek, Castoriadis, about the Workers' Council. Maybe there's a link about it. I don't know. Maybe it's very left infantile, if Lenin said. But I think in the condition of the 21st century, I think it's quite relevant if we make solidarity between workers in international. And I see that for international also have the solidarity. I think it's from me. Thank you, Oscar. And Workers of the World Unite.
Thank you, Hugo. I think, look, I mean, I agree that it's a different context in some ways today. When, as I say, when Trotsky formulated or generalized the theory of permanent revolution, there was still, direct colonial dominance over most of the world. And there have been national revolutions in every single country, once colonized since then. But I think the theory remains, immensely relevant in the fact that these were revolutions which never escaped the bounds of kind of bourgeois nationalist regimes, and because of that, never resolved the fundamental questions of national oppression, of imperialism, which continue to play a central role in the lives of millions of people across the world. So I think that's really quite important. So I think that's, to me, for us, why permanent revolution remains a relevant question, a relevant theory to understanding and to arming a revolutionary leadership to fight imperialism. I think regarding, we talk about class consciousness and how do we develop class consciousness. I think class consciousness is something which only develops in the process of political struggle, of class struggle. And in a neocolonial context, the struggle against imperialism has to be turned into a class struggle. I think that's the lesson of permanent revolution. I think that's what I can say.
Oke, tes. Gimana, Mas Hugo? Mic-nya dibunyikan dulu.
Okay, thank you,
Udah.
Oscar. Maybe we
Jawab.
need to talk more than in the next session.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Mas Fuad.
Oke, ya, terima kasih. Kalau gitu kita move on ke pertanyaan selanjutnya. Maybe seperti yang Mas Hugo bilang tadi, maybe you can share your social after
Yeah.
these meetings, because it seems that many people interested to have a conversation directly with you in the next future. Okay, so the next questioner is Mas Yusuf Salim. Okay. Monggo silahkan Mas Yusuf di open mic sama sama open video. Oh, udah. Mic-nya tolong dihidupkan. Belum hidup mic-nya, dibunyiin. Oke.
Hello.
Oke. Mau ditanya langsung ke beliaunya?
Yeah, sure. Hello, Oscar.
Okay.
Long time no see.
Very, very good.
Hello.
Are you in SL now? I mean, in the office.
Yeah, in the office.
Great. Well, so the question is not really a question, but I think why don't you share about what do I say? The permanent revolution in action, what ICL has been done in Australia, like in relation to the Aboriginal struggle, that maybe we could learn a lesson of it. How do we implement it in Indonesia, with many nationalities actually fighting for their liberation, like from the RMS, the Maluku Selatan or Aceh, GAM, and then also what you have wrote before, the West Papuan struggle. So yeah, probably from your tactics, your struggle with Aboriginal struggle in Australia, we could take a lesson how do we see the permanent revolution in practice.
Yeah, I think thank you for doing my job for me, and recommending me things to talk about. I think that is a good thing to talk about. The earlier question about Indigenous people and Indigenous liberation. In Australia, kind of last year there was a referendum on whether to include a kind of mostly symbolic political expression of Aboriginal people in Parliament, a voice to Parliament, which was pushed by the Australian Labor Party, run by the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. What we fought for, this was, really a symbolic thing which would not actually resolve the question of Aboriginal liberation, but it was also a progressive project. It was a positive thing for Aboriginal people and for Indigenous people in Australia to have a voice, being used as a liberal cover for the reactionary Labor Party, which is in power in government right now in Australia. So we fought for a campaign for an anti-Albanese, anti-Labor Party voice campaign, and fought to use this sort of moment of struggle to kind of attack the government, which was using it cynically and in its own interests. We were in support of the victory of a voice to then be used against the government and against Australian capitalism. I think there's like a large number of sections. I think the work of the Mexican section of the Spartacus League has done a really a great deal of work around how to put turn the theory of permanent revolution into a practical program of struggle in various strikes at major like factories and working class areas that are owned by imperialist capital, and really trying to take all of these things and turn that into a question of the struggle against imperialism, and to combat the national bourgeoisie in countries like Mexico, which are using it as a which similar to I think Jokowi in Indonesia have similar programs of oil nationalization, which have been kind of hotly contested, and about how do you like campaign on that and fight to support it, but also to move it in a way that goes beyond the bounds of what is acceptable to bourgeois nationalism. So I'd recommend, if you're interested, to look into it's in Spanish, but the work of the Mexican section of the Spartacus League as well.
Oke, Mas Yusuf, gimana dengan jawabannya? Cukup memuaskan? Halo, Mas Yusuf, are you there? Oke. Dibunyikan lagi untuk memberikan sinyal bahwasanya
Yeah,
jawabannya
sure.
memuaskan.
That's awesome. Thanks, Oscar.
Okay, now we are moving on to there's no next questioner. Yeah, but we still have like 30 more minutes to have a conversation. But since that there's no one asking questions, maybe you can finish your session with mine. Maybe I want to ask you a question about what's Spartacus League and why choose that name?
The Spartacus League, we're a international Marxist organization. The name Spartacus League comes out of the German Revolution, and the Spartacus League in the German Revolution in the early 20th century. We're an international Marxist organization, and I think, as I put forward in our presentation, our central kind of orientation is to build Leninist parties across the world as sections of a democratic centralist international. So really building what is an international organization that's able to fight that. We come from out of the Trotskyist tradition, and we talk about the Fourth International. We can which was founded by Trotsky in the struggle against Stalinism, but also was kind of destroyed in the post-war period by a number of internal and external sort of crises. So we're committed to we're Fourth Internationalists in that we're struggling to reforge an international organization of mass like working class parties across the world.
How does one join the party then? The league.
What's that? Sorry.
How do we join the Spartacists or the Force?
Well, we're a political organization in a number of countries. Unfortunately, not in Indonesia, but if you'd like to engage in political discussion, actually genuinely do get into contact because, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I just want to give the idea to everyone's here. If you want to have a discussion with the Spartacists and the Fourth, or maybe if in the future there is an Indonesian Spartacist League or the Fourth International in Indonesia, yeah, who knows? You can make the initiative to make the party available here in Indonesia. As I'm saying, I'm not that politically literate, so yeah, I just interested in all of these ideas going around, and I think it's always something beneficial towards my knowledge. So yeah. There's one more question from Muhammad Arham again. One more question. Oh, Mas Angga even raised his hands. But we start to. Do you still have the energy? Right? We still have like 25 minutes again, Oscar.
Yes, of course.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay. What is the difference or the criticism Marxism Trotsky against another Marxism? Okay. Let. Perbedaan atau kritik Marxism Trotsky? What is the difference between the Trotsky Marxism and the other Marxism? So this question.
Yeah.
Do you understand the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, continue.
I think Trotskyism is the struggle for the renewal of like genuine Marxism and like the Leninist tradition following the Russian Revolution, and I think it emerges out of the struggle against Stalinism and the degeneration of the Russian Revolution into bureaucratic rule by the Stalinist kind of a bureaucratic clique, which took control of the Russian Revolution following kind of the defeat of the international spread of the revolution, the isolation of the Soviet Union, and the result of that is a number of real political divergences from kind of the basics of Marxism. I think one of the most important is that Stalinism formulated the theory that of socialism in one country, that by just simply the method, like the effort of a single country, it could arrive at a higher stage of socialism. In fact, Trotsky continually rejected that thing in line with kind of the Marxist understanding that the revolutionary transformation of society cannot take place in one country on its own. It has to be an international process of revolutionary struggle. I think that is also kind of a central divergence of permanent revolution.
Okay. Do you have something more to add? Or that's all?
I can talk more, but I think Trotskyism is really a struggle against both the against Stalinism, against centrism, which conciliates to capitalism and to bourgeois democracy and to all of these class forces which are opposed to the interests of the working class.
Okay. Mas Muhammad Arham, gimana jawabannya memuaskan? Do you find the answer satisfying, or do you have any other further question to ask? Okay, he gave the thumbs up. So yeah, right. So we can move on to the next questioner is Mas Angga. I think he's your friend. He's the one
Yes.
who introduced me to your number. Oke, Mas Angga, silakan. Jangan suaranya aja, mukanya juga kalau bisa. Please not only the voice, but also the face. I mean, I've never been practically see your face we've been friends for like 3 or 4 months. Mas Angga, monggo silakan. Halo, Mas Angga. Kita ke mute. Udah kok ini diminta bunyikan. Oke. Right. So, silahkan Mas Angga saya.
Halo.
Nah,
Tapi ya lagi di perjalanan, jadi mungkin agak patah-patah gambar saya dan suara saya.
oke, nanti saya bantuin Pak Pravo.
Langsung gas aja ya.
Gas.
So Oscar, we have been talking lately on WhatsApp. So maybe I just want to ask you a general questions. According to our world condition today, in your opinion, to create a collective movement so we can start from the socialism in one country or going through internationalism. Just it, Oscar. Just it.
I think the lesson of permanent revolution specifically is that, of course, the social revolution happened, the conquest of power by the working class takes place in one country, and that's not something, starts in one country, but that doesn't end the process. That only begins the revolutionary transformation of society. I think that's kind of the divergence with Stalinism, which is that there is not a need for the revolution to continue onwards. I think that's also the case you see with the Stalinist countries today, which don't fight for the extension of socialism outside of their boundaries. So, the objective thing is that the working class might be able to take power in one country, but it then will find itself encircled by world imperialism. It will find itself lacking, the international, the high levels of development that are required to exist in a global world system. So I think that it's really an objective factor is that we live in an interconnected, imperialized globe, and that there's no victory of socialism in a single country. There's only the beginning of a revolutionary process.
How do you find the answer, Mas Angga? You're still mute. Mas, masih mute. Mas, masih termute, Mas. Wait, I will ask him more stringently.
Okay. I got your point, Oscar. And I think I just want to confirm about my assumption in my head and also about the approach on the political economy also. But yeah, I got your answer, Oscar. Just it, Mas Fuad. Thank you, Oscar.
Okay. Right. So how do you find all the questions for
Very well.
so
I
far,
think
Oscar?
they're very well. I'd be happy to talk about them.
Okay. So there is another questioner. I don't know whether we have discussed this one. He
Yes,
basically Putra
from
basically asked,
Putra.
the strategies to develop Marxist understanding in Indonesia. Oh, oh, this is a very cool question. Wait, what are the right steps to take in Indonesia to develop the movement?
Yes, I think that's a really important question, and I wish I had a fully formulated answer as to how to struggle as a Marxist in Indonesia. I understand it's a very difficult situation, which will necessarily require work which is outside, beyond the bounds of what's stigmatized and what's acceptable to the government. I think there is, restrictions on the publishing of books, but I think there are real ways to study Marxism still. There's a reasonably large collection of Marxist works on the Marxist Internet Archive online, which I'd recommend. And I think it's also the task of Indonesian Marxists to struggle to put together a program in education for an Indonesian context itself. I think in terms of the steps to develop the movement, I think, as I briefly touched on in the presentation, the struggle against imperialism really is something that has to be opened, and I think that is actually an opening for Marxists who have something to offer. The struggle against imperialism, and when you talk about fighting neocolonialism, fighting global finance capital and the oligarchy and things like that, that is, I think, less stigmatized than talking just specifically about Marxism. I guess that would be my answer to that. And so I think, you have to have a program which provides a revolutionary and a Marxist answer to the really felt needs of working class people in every single country. And I think throughout the neo-colonial world, that demands an answer to the question of national emancipation and the struggle against imperialism. So I think whatever is the path to the reforging of a Marxist party in Indonesia, that will require a struggle, a program, and a fight around the question of the struggle against imperialism.
Okay, Mr. Putra, how do you find the answer? Oh wait, there's another questioner. Okay, but first we have to conclude by asking Mr. Putra. Sudah jelas bang. Okay, it's already clear. Okay.
I also agree with the note put in there by Joseph
Salim. Do you have anything to add about Joseph Salim's answer? I still try to grasp the answer. Or do you can elaborate more about his answer with your own words?
I think Marxism is a method and is a broad political program, not necessarily simply a word. And I think its task is to relate to the really felt needs and to provide a revolutionary answer to the struggles of the working class, which happen regardless of whether that happens, but can only be brought to victory with a Marxist program, with a Marxist and with Marxist organization and revolutionary leadership. So I think there's a struggle for Marxists to be able to relate to every struggle as it comes up, to provide a revolutionary answer to it, and to use that to build a revolutionary leadership in Indonesia and to wrest control of the workers' movement from liberal and pro-capitalist and bourgeois nationalist sort of forces which currently monopolize it.
Okay, now this is NV, the initial, not NV, Dengki. He asked that he asked you, what is the position of your Spartacist league?
Mhm.
Are they take a full position to give benefit to give full benefit to working class, or there is another consideration? For example, theoretically, it's like um, about the case of Luigi Mangione. I think all of us already know about this
Mhm.
this shooting incident, which I don't really think it's an incident at all, but still. Yeah, so maybe we can paraphrase the question with what is the position of your Spartacist League? Are you aiming for gaining a full benefit towards the working class, or is there another goals in mind?
I think the aim of the Spartacist League and of I think the Marxist movement in general is for the social emancipation of the working class, for the coming to power of the working class. Ultimately, it's a struggle to for new Russian revolutions in which the working class seizes state power and begins the struggle uh, to confront to build a socialist future internationally. So I think we have quite high aims, which are nothing less than the conquest of power by the working class. I'm not sure. I don't think Envy brought up the case of Luigi Menegoni, but we do have an article out of him now in our most recent American newspaper, which I'd recommend reading. Obviously, his tactics are counterproductive, but it's a case which is really a reflection of a real crisis within American capitalism. And it's a surge of, I think, righteous action against the kind of brutality of the capitalist system. And so we on that basis we call for the release of Luigi, the pardoning of Luigi Menegoni. And I think it's a important case for the working class movement in the United States to rally around.
Oke, Mas Envy, Mas NP, gimana dengan jawabannya Mas Oscar? Yeah, again, I'm still kind of grasping all the concepts about the social. What were the words? Social Marxism of the world, you said?
I think so the basics of Marxism is that there is a class division of society, that there is a capitalist class with control over the means of production and over the political system and a state which exists to serve the ruling class. And the struggle of Marxism is a struggle for a social revolution, which puts into power a new working class, the working class.
Oke, Mas NP gimana dengan jawabannya Mas Oscar tadi? Kalau kalau belum puas ini kita langsung aja melompat ke penanya berikutnya. Mungkin penanya bisa jadi penanya terakhir. Kalau nggak ada bisa kita tutup sekarang. Masih ada waktu sekitar 8 menit untuk to conclude our meeting. But wait, why people already leaving the class already? That's Come on, ada yang nanya lagi? Working class jadinya bang, full working class. So it's to become a full working class, he said. Does he implying that the goal of Marxism is to make all the class in the world is everyone is working class?
The final goal of Marxism is the abolition of class distinction altogether. And the system of capitalism basically creates a condition in which there are two kind of central classes, the working class and which earns money by selling its labor power, and the ruling class which owns the modes of production, and that these are two classes which are in conflict, which has to be resolved ultimately in the interests of either the continued exploitation of the working class or the taking of power by the working class, which would in the long run mean the struggle for socialism, which is a classless society.
Classless society. Okay, I'm starting to understand the gist of these concepts, and yeah, aren't we all covered? Oh, so look at the chat right now; it's so lively, and yeah, I sorry if I'm getting way too excited, but it's the conclusion. Mas NV said makasih banyak bang. He's satisfied with your answer, and I think I'm starting to understand everything. And yeah, I'm just trying to paraphrase all the chats going on. Yeah, you should talk to Mas Hugo, a part of working class. Aren't we all comrade? So my interaction with Marxism, communism always come from the lens of Hollywood. Pardon the kind of answer. So I always see this kind of thinking is somewhat inherently not good. I'm the product of American entertainment, so yeah, this kind of giving me a new kind of perspective about seeing these class things, and I start to understand where this all focuses on. Okay, so although Marxists will abolish the class, I won't let this class. Oh, maksudnya this class, Mas Hugo, this class we are attending right now. Apparently we still have we have time limit, Mas Hugo, so we'll be sooner rather than later ending the class, but not abolishing it. So yeah, okay. I went off a little of tangent there. No, you're serious, Mas Hugo. Mas Hugo, Anda serius? Kelas-kelas seperti ini harus dijalankan lagi. So yeah, let's get back to the discussion. Ada yang mau nanya lagi? Kalau tidak, kita bisa akhiri kelasnya sekarang. Walaupun pastinya akan ada sesi-sesi kedepannya lagi di mana kita membahas diskusi-diskusi tentang Marxism. Oscar, do you have a closing statement? Maybe we can move on to the closing session.
I don't particularly have a closing statement. Apologies, but it's been very. Thank you very much for the ability to speak today, and to put forward a Marxist perspective on the class struggle and the struggle against imperialism. And I would definitely recommend anybody who's interested to really study Trotsky's work on permanent revolution, and also the work of the ICL to put forward a program of permanent revolution for the modern day, and a program of struggle against imperialism and capitalism for the neo-colonial world. I think that's all I can say.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I guess that'll be all. Again, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Oscar. Terima kasih, Oscar. It's a pleasure.
Terima kasih banyak.
Sampai jumpa sama kawan-kawan semua. Kita akan jumpa lagi di tahun depan sepertinya, karena ini merupakan kelas penutup, kelas terakhir di tahun 2024 dan di sesi Marxisme Odyssey kali ini. Kalau begitu saya undur diri. Sekali lagi terima kasih. Assalamualaikum. Selamat malam. Okay, Oscar, see you. Thank you very much.
See you.
Again.
Thank you, everybody.